friends, let's read chapter 13 of My Teacher's an Alien. Starts on page 85. Chapter 13. Rumors. Stacy and Mike did a good job, didn't they? Asked Peter when we got together on the playground. What are you talking about? I asked. Stacy and Mike. Didn't you think that fight they put on was pretty good? The fight they put on? I echoed. Peter sounded impatient. Stacy and Mike are afraid that Broxholm will decide one of them is the best kid in class and then try to kidnap whichever one he chooses. So they decided to fake a fight, mess up their reputations a little bit. All of a sudden, everything came clear. That's why Duncan brought Mr. Smith an apple this morning, I said. Peter giggled. Pathetic, isn't it? But it might work. Right now, Duncan is a pretty sure pick for worst kid in class. But if he works really hard, he might actually manage to pull himself off the bottom from the list. Since he knows no matter what he does, he's never going to push himself into the most average category. If he can improve at all, he's probably safe. The problem is, he's been so bad all year that it's going to take major effort to get out of that bottom spot. Peter paused, then added, I intend to have some fun with him over the next 3 days. 3 days. That was all the time we had before Broxholm was scheduled to kidnap 5 of us into space. That's not very nice, I started to say. But then I remembered the way Duncan had tormented Peter for the last 6 years. I decided I couldn't blame Peter if he wanted to get a little bit of his own back while he could. Any decision to be a nice guy about this was going to have to come from inside of himself. I decided to change the subject. Tell me, I said. Just how did they know about all this? I told them, said Peter. And they believed you? Actually, it made sense. If they were going to believe anyone, it would be Peter. He had a reputation as being the most honest kid in class, which was one of his problems. He didn't know how to tell the kind of little white lies that keep people from getting mad at you. But I doubted that even his reputation for honesty would convince people the story was actually true. Peter smiled. Actually, you're the reason anyone believed me. It started with Stacy. She just didn't believe you had really fainted. Or that if you had, you would have tried to grab the teacher's ear on the way down. So she knew something was going on. Later, she cornered me on the playground and demanded to know what you were up to. Why you? I asked. Peter blushed. You're going to hate this, he said. There's a rumor going around that you're my girlfriend because we've been spending so much time talking on the playground. Ugh! Yuck! I yelled. Yuck, yuck, yuck! Suddenly, I realized what I had done. Don't take that personally, I said. I won't, said Peter, since I feel the same way. Hey, I thought, what do you mean you feel the same way? But we didn't have time to work that out right now. Anyway, said Peter, Stacy was convinced I must know what's going on, and since I did, I told her. The whole story? I gasped. Peter nodded. She didn't believe me at first, of course, but when she talked to you on Saturday and you told her there was nothing actually wrong with you, she figured it must be true. He laughed. That was all it took. By Saturday afternoon, the phone lines were humming all over Kentucky Falls. How come you know all this? I asked. How come no one's asked me? Peter shrugged. That's not the way rumors work. People never check with the source. They always ask someone else. Don't ask me why, but it's true. Lots of stupid things are true. Anyway, Stacy told Mike, and Mike told someone else, and that was it. It's the kind of story that travels fast. And they believed it all? I asked. Peter shook his head. I don't think so. At least not yet. Except Duncan. He's so dim he'll believe anything. Especially if Stacy and Mike believe it. He thinks they know everything, so That's why he hates them so much. I see, I said, though some of this was coming a little too fast for me. Well, do you suppose if enough of us start to believe it, the adults will pay attention to us? Peter looked as if I'd just suggested Mickey Mouse was likely to be the next president of the United States. Get real, Susan, he said. They'll say it's just another crazy kid rumor. Do you remember last year when half the people in the school were convinced the president was coming to Kentucky Falls to make a speech? I nodded. I almost believed it myself. Half because so many of my friends did, half because I wanted it to be true. I also remembered how my father had laughed when he heard about it. Just 1,000 idiots believe something that doesn't make it true, he had said. Which was true, I guess. But it certainly didn't help us now. That was when Peter decided to complicate things with a new problem. What are you going to do about this yourself? He asked. Well, what do you mean? Well, since one of the things on Broxham's shopping list is the best kid in class, if we can't unmask him, you've got a good chance at being picked yourself. That was the best laugh I'd had in days. You're nuts, I said. There's no way I could be picked for top kid in class. There is too. It all depends on how he's making his choice. The way I see it, there are the four of us that might be considered the best in class. Stacy, Michael, you, and me. You're nuts, I said again. Listen to me. Stacy and Michael are your basic perfect students, but they did a good job of taking themselves out of the running. Though to tell you the truth, I don't think Broxham would have chosen either of them anyway. They're real bright, but they don't think that much. They believe everything the teacher tells them. I'm sure Broxham is bright enough to know that doesn't make a great student. He paused. Then there's me, he said. I'm real bright, but I'm not motivated. I'm not very social. You know how it goes. Peter's a good student, but he's not very well-rounded. I hear it every year. That leaves you, Susan. You get good grades. You get along with everyone. You're in all kinds of activities. Let's face it, you may not be the best in any one thing, but when you look at everything together, you make a pretty good pick for the top of the class. I stared at him in horror. You're not kidding, are you? He shook his head. That is the end of chapter 13.